Hi, this is Dr. Frederick. I just want to talk to you a little bit about variables and measurement. What is a quantitative variable? And so, when I ask students to make up research question, in the first week you sort of get some ideas of things you might be interested in investigating, and sometimes students come up with issues that are dear to them somehow, interest them. But the goal of this course is to get you to think about variables and how to measure them reliably and validly, and to operationalize your measurement of variables so that when you run a research project, it doesn't matter who's collecting the data. The data are the same, no matter who you use. So you trust the data, and you're looking at relationships because you trust that the data have been reliably and accurately measured. And you don't say, well, this is we're looking at some data that Joe collected, and of course, now we'll look at the same sort of folks using Deb, and believing that there's some difference in the data just because of who collected it. Your goal is to define your variables, and the real trouble is, look, here's something that a student might do is, they might say, I have two variables, music and learning. These aren't variables. These are not things that can be measured or can vary. Now, there's characteristics of music that can be measured. There's characteristics of music that can vary. And, we could look at the genres of music and, maybe have classical. What sort of, just identify what genre is your favorite? So somebody might say classical, only I would say that. I don't even know different genres of music. Hip-hop, big band, jazz, R&B, something like that. Well, these are not measurements. These are categories. And we're not interested in categories in music. So what might be something related to learning? Well, it could be like your GPA. So your GPA might be 3. Now we have some quantitative measures. Okay? Can't have a 4, I guess. All right, so these might be your GPAs for what? For a semester, for a course, for a career of education, your high school GPA, your college GPA. You have to get real specific and see that we would no longer call it learning, we would call it GPA. And then to operationalize it, you would say GPA was operationalized to be what? The GPA for the core curriculum courses of your senior year, the last semester of your senior year. Okay, then everybody can go and say, okay, what are the core curriculum courses, or we're just looking at certain courses, and I come up with some numbers, and then I would go to music. I would say hours listened to music per day, or I have some measurement of that, And then if we could, so then our variable would not be music, it would be hours of listening to music. How does hours of listening to music relate to GPA? Okay, here's some other things that students have come up with. Smoking. Well, that's not a variable. There are variables related to smoking which can be measured. Let's just focus on quantitative. Number of cigarettes smoked per day, average pack per day. What about here? So I want to look at the relationship between smoking and lung cancer. Well, lung cancer isn't a variable. If you have lung cancer, it's a constant. Everybody's got it. I want to look at the rates. I want to look at rates of lung cancer. Rates would be a quantity. Okay, but you can't really do that on individuals, so we're not interested in that. Here's other things, like juvenile delinquency. I'm interested in the relationship between juvenile delinquency and drug use. Okay? Either one of these are variables. Now, there are many variables related to juvenile delinquency, and of course there's very many variables related to drug use. But these two things themselves are not variables. Okay, so I hope you can begin to see this. Here, let me just, I wrote down some things that, people say. Let's write down some more. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is not a variable. You can't look at the relationship between sexual abuse and, depression. Depression's not a variable. Now, there are variables related to each of these issues, but you have to say, what is it that can vary? What can vary with related to sexual abuse? Well, age first abused, okay? That's a variable. You see, everybody that we are going to study, there's an age at which they were first abused, if they were abused. Severity of abuse, that would be a variable. I can look at the relationship between the severity of abuse and the intensity of depression. Well, you see, I can say as measured by what? As measured by some score on some scale. Okay, that would be perfect. Severity of abuse related to the intensity of depression, or the severity of depression, or age of first onset, or something that each person has their own values. And let's just look at, I have some more written down here. Bullying, very common one recently. Bullying, but that's not a variable. What are some variables related to bullying? Fearfulness, and we'll put rating there to make it a quantity, some rating of fearfulness that a child might have in going to school. That's something related to bullying. Or, number of assaults incurred. That would be a variable. Okay, let me show you what we're going for. Okay, let's just close this sheet. And let's open up a new sheet here. So let's do something like intensity, or rating of anxiety, and some dampness measure of palmar sweating. Okay, so we have some little galvanic skin device or something. We have something that measures the dampness of our palmar sweating, and we're going to operationally define it as some measure on a little electrode that we paste to the person's palm. So then the ratings go anywhere from 1 to 10, and I'm just going to put down, and then I'll vary it a little bit like this. Okay, randomly assign some values here. This is what we're going for. So when you write your research question, you should say, what would these numbers be? Okay, so this is some rating, 14 is too high. This is some rating that would be taken from some, the Frederick scale of anxiety. What was your highest level of anxiety during your personnel interview? All right, so then we have some measures of palmar sweating. And since, I'm just making them up without looking at the other side here, it should be fairly random. And we'll say again that there's, some decimal value between 1 and 10. Just stay with me here. I want you to see where this is going. Okay, so now what I have, and this is what you should anticipate with your research questions, how do I get two columns of numbers, X and Y? Okay, so let's think of this as X and Y. We're going to have two variables that we're measuring, and now I can ask about the relationship here because I have two quantities. And I'm gonna delete this here again just so I can do something in Excel. What Excel is interested in is looking at relationships and things like correlation. But you see, let's just put in a scatter plot here, okay? Okay, so this is a dampness. Let's see. Okay, so they got it right. Here's the X value, and let's just change this to not be confusing. We'll just go to 10 here. Okay, and so look, as we go from 0 to 10 on anxiety, let's get rid of this because that's a little bit confusing. We'll get rid of this because this is confusing. Okay, so here's the relationship in a scatter plot. And so let's just do one more thing here, layout, and we'll put axis titles here. We'll put here rating of anxiety. Okay, and here, we'll just do it up here. Primary vertical axis. Here. Dampness measure. Okay. So this is the relationship, and we can see it here. And because Excel will do this for us, here, let's get rid of this. All right, now it's easier to see. And let's just add a trend line. Okay. We'll get a linear trend line. There it is. And it says, as your rating of anxiety tends to increase, the dampness measure tends to increase. I don't know why that happened, but then what else can we do? We can display an equation. We can display an R value, and then when you say what is the relationship between two things, this is what you're actually asking. You say, oh, well, the dampness measure is you take 0.22 and then you add 3.85 times. Oh, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. You take 3.8 and you add 0.22 times the rating of anxiety, and that will predict the dampness measure. Okay? That's a relationship. A relationship is a linear trend between two quantitative variables. And so when you ask about the relationship between, bullying and poverty, you should think, well, what would that graph look like? Oh, what am I measuring? Oh, how would I measure it? See, then all these questions become very obvious to you. If I want to make the scatter plot, and this is where you should be in this course, is by your final paper. Hopefully by the week 3 paper, because you're going to be graded on this, you'll get this idea. Oh, I'm asking about the relationship between two quantitative variables, and in so doing, I could graph them. What would that graph look like? Where would I get these numbers from? Oh, is that a variable? Is poverty a variable? No, it doesn't vary. You're poor. What is a variable related to poverty? How about just income? We don't have to think poverty or wealth or anything. Just think income. How much money do you make a year? Well, that's something different for each person. That's a variable. And what would be related to that? Bullying. Number of times that you've been bullied in the past year. Okay, those are two quantitative variables. I can make a scatter plot. And this is the question that you should be asking. Okay, thanks.